What was it, electrical contracting that you updated?
There was a number in the significant issue, and change construction.
Yeah, show it. Let her do it.
I know, I need to teach her how to sing.
So this number right here is, yes, that's what I sent you, and what it is they, the department heads use those two numbers. I'm Laura, by the way. I'm an attorney.
And then Rachel is the technical director of the fire disaster public council. She used to work here just for the
Oh,
So you'll see her around some. She's much more hands-on than the other director. Ron Jones. Okay, I never saw him, never met him. Rachel's got her hands and everything, which is good. She's
I won't
supposed
worry
to.
about that, Dixie.
Okay.
That's just gonna,
Supposed to. I don't know if she did.
that's my code though.
Is there an agenda? Or is it just gonna be
Change from,
an email?
yes, so probably in the same order that got it.
That was which I don't have.
Have you met Zach Kirby? He's another attorney.
hey,
What's your name?
Zachary.
Hey, Zachary. Nice to meet you, buddy.
Good to meet you.
I don't have the horns you probably heard of.
And, well, they do come out, just, you know.
Sometimes
Those are fine.
I would have been filling in.
Some guy, is a mutual friend of yours.
I
I was
was
very
That's the only one I got
surprised.
today.
I got this tower, radio tower or something, that's like 55 feet tall. I'm trying to sell it. I just guess there's someone I've taken out. And he said he was a mutual friend. I gotta find him. He didn't come to see it. So, pretty handsome, which I solution. You got friends everywhere.
I saw him because they don't have to see me or put up with it. You have to be around me the only time that ends.
I found it.
How are you doing?
That's what I was.
Living the dream. Living the dream. I love you, Madam Chairman.
Yes, that's just the order for.
Oh, how are you?
Yeah,
Good, how are
that's
you?
the order of everything.
Yeah, that's,
And that's the powder.
They never have been on.
We noticed the meeting.
On Peon.
I talked to him today. He knew we were gonna be meeting this morning.
Trying to think.
I'm about to start.
No.
You're good?
Thank you.
Send him a text. Franklin, you about ready to get started, or are you going to visit somebody real quick? We don't need a quorum for the work meeting. I'll be up in 3 minutes. After work. Rafferty. Here's this gavel. You can hit here or your head, whichever you choose. Let's get started. Senator Barfoot. Excuse me, we're going to get the meeting started. Senator Barfoot will join us shortly. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Senator Coleman Madison, Senator Gavan, Senator Gudger, Senator Kelly, Representative Pringle,
Here.
Representative Rafferty. Okay. Representative Shedd, Representative Simpson? Representative Underwood? Representative Wilcox?
Underwood's on his way and Margie is here. Underwood's at a bill signing.
And Senator Barfoot. And he's on his way as well.
I'd like to introduce Ms. Dixie Thomas. Would you please introduce yourself to the board members that this is your first meeting to conduct?
I'm Dixie Thomas. I am the new Director of Operational Audits. This is my first set of sunsets, so I am a little nervous, but it's great to be here with you all, and I hope that you will get a lot of good use and information out of our reports.
All righty, thank you. Do we have any comments from the board members before we get started? All right, well, you'll proceed with the first report. Thank you, ma'am.
The first report that we have, these are stacked in order of just how they're going to go tomorrow. That's the order I put them in. So the first one is on the Board of Examiners in Psychology. This board was created in 1963 to regulate the practice of psychology in Alabama. There are 8 members appointed by the governor for this board. 1 member is faculty of an accredited college. There are 5 psychologists, 1 psychological technician, and then 1 member of the general public. The board has an executive director, Ms. Lori Rawl. She's appointed by the board. They have 2 employees. Their funds are housed within the state treasury. As of June 1st of 2023, they had 1,163 licensees. They have 2 types of licenses that they issue, a psychologist and a psychological technician. Their licenses expire annually, and for fiscal year 2023, the licensees can't renew online, but they said that that is coming for fiscal year 24, so they're having to do it in person or through the mail as of right now. We have their financial information can be found on page 15 of the report. Their revenues for the fiscal year 2022 were $328,000, and their disbursements were $293,000. Their unobligated cash balances at the end of 2022 were $474,000. We did have 2 significant issues that we noted in our review. Both of these are dealing with meetings held by the board. The first one has to do with noncompliance with the Open Meetings Act. We reviewed the minutes of 28 meetings, and the first bullet is that following the expiration of the governor's emergency proclamation to address COVID-19, the board held 4 meetings via video conferencing, establishing a quorum. And at that point, when those meetings were held, you were not allowed to do that. Now, all these laws have changed, and they were tweaked a lot during this time, but at the time these meetings were held, they weren't allowed to establish a quorum via video conferencing. The second bullet with that is 3 meetings were held, and the board members were attending via video electronic communication, and they participated in an executive session at the time those meetings were held. And again, the rules have changed and been tweaked since then, but we went through all of the executive orders and made sure that they were in compliance at the time of what rules were in place. The next significant issue also has to do with meetings. Subsequent to the passage of Act 2022-421, the board held meetings 2 times and established a quorum when only 2 of the 8 members were physically present. So that act said that at least 3 members or a majority of a quorum, whichever is less, had to be physically present. And so this was after July 1st, 2022, when that law became effective.
Do we have any questions of the examiner? All right, let's move on to the next board. Oh, excuse me.
On their, as far as the cash balances, I think it was 474,000. Is there anything that restricts them on where they need to spend that, or they have to put that back towards the licensees? Or is there a reserve that they have to meet before they can spend anything at all? Because it seems like it's growing every year, which is good for the board, but I want to make sure it's going back to the training and to whatever we need to for the licensees that are putting the money in.
There are no required distributions, and their statute allows them to retain their fund balance at the end of the year. And their expenditures, it doesn't necessarily say that they're spending any. They spent $100 on grants and benefits in 2020, but that's it. Everything else appear to be operations of the board.
And how many people did you say were on this board?
There are 8 members.
8 members, and you said there's an executive director, correct?
Yes, and they have 2 employees also.
That's all I've got.
Madam Chair. So there are 2 significant issues where basically they were ahead of the game as far as being in compliance with the Meetings Act and those types of things. So they should be fine from here on out. They understand the gravity of what their violation was.
They seem to. Their response is the last appendix in the back of your report for all of these, and they seem to. And the thing is the second significant issue, the law had already changed and said you have to have 3 or a majority to be in person to establish the quorum, and they didn't comply with that. That was the problem. They only had 2 physically present. So that was after the law changed. They still didn't do it quite right, and that was after July 1st of 2022, because that was when that law was effective.
Well, and then I guess they've also not publishing the access information was another issue with
Right.
all of these meetings, even with the one in 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
Any further questions from the members about this report? All right, let's go forward with the next one. Representative Underwood, you haven't missed a lot. You got here right in time when we started. No, appreciate it.
Okay. The next report in your stack is the ABC Board. It was created in 1936. The ABC Board regulates the manufacturing, distribution, and sale of alcoholic beverages in our state, as well as the sale of tobacco products. They operate resale and wholesale stores, and they distribute the profits, taxes, and fees to the general fund, the education trust fund, the law enforcement agency, DHR, mental health, Department of Revenue, and then to Alabama cities and counties. This board is made up of 3 members that are appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate, and 1 member is designated by the governor as chair. The administrator is currently Curtis Stewart. He was appointed by the governor on January 1st of 2023. There are 860 employees at the ABC boards, but this is going to include the employees that work in the ABC stores. The board operates from special revenue funds inside of the state treasury. They have 3 operating funds and 4 non-operating funds. All of the financial information for those funds begin on page 25 of their report. Their operating fund had receipts of $85.4 million in 21-22 and expenditures of $87.6 million. Their unobligated cash balance at the end of 2022 was $6.5 million. Their local share operating fund had receipts of $497.7 million and disbursements of $493.2 million. And that had an unobligated cash balance at the end of the year of $46 million. The third operating fund is the Children's Trust Fund. It had receipts of $613,000 and the same disbursements of $613,000 and unobligated cash at the end of the year of $91,000.
Madam Chairman, thank you. What page are you on?
I'm sorry, we started on page 25, and now I'm on 28.
Sounds great. Whenever you flip, just let me know. I'm sorry about that. I'm a little slow.
Feel free to ask questions as you go along, because I know when we get into this one, there's particularly a lot of financial stuff that you might want to jump in and ask. You're recognized.
The Children's Trust Fund, is there do you have more detail on that one? Other than this is pretty summarized here. Do you have, is there more detail available?
We can get that for you, some detail of like who the personnel are and the benefits. Yes, sir, we can get that for you.
Thank you.
I have it. Mhm. Okay. Starting on page 29 is the financial summaries of the non-operating funds. The first one is the ABC Board non-operating fund. They did not have any receipts in 21-22. They have an unobligated cash balance of $20,526. And this is the county ABC licensing fund. It accounts for county licensing fees collected by the board that are payable to the county, so the money goes in and out. The next is the Beer and Wine Local Government Fund. It's another operating fund. It does the same thing. The money comes in and goes back out to the local governments. So,
I have a question on that.
yes, ma'am.
Do we track these funds further when they get down into the county, or what is the mechanism to account for the accountability of these funds?
So when we look at the counties individually, like when they go to each individual county, when we do our county commission audits, we'll look and see that the ABC funds come in if they come to certain counties, and then they can be used for different purposes. We check that usually when we're doing like the county commission's audit. We don't do it necessarily through this process normally.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna, offline, I want to work on that a little bit, so if you'll get with me after the meeting.
All right, the next on page 30 is another operating fund, the Beer and License Division allotments. It had revenues of $2.7 million. It didn't have any disbursements during this year. This fund accounts for the collection and distribution of beer taxes and alcohol beverage license fees as required by section 28.3.184 and 28.3.A.22 and 23. The last non-operating fund that we have is the Beer Tax Local Share Fund. It is a holding account for beer taxes collected pending distribution to local governments. And so it had equal disbursements and distributions for the year with the exception of 25 cents. So. All right. This board issues a whole lot of licenses. I'm sorry, hang on. They issue 13 different type of retail licenses, 4 different type of wholesale licenses, 2 types of warehouse licenses, a manufacturing license, 12 types of other licenses for importers, brew pubs, etc. They issued 23,857 licenses as of February 1st, 2023. I'm sorry, I'm back on page 8. And if you look at the performance characteristics that we have included there, and it's on page 16, you can see their number of licenses issued has remained pretty steady. We do not have any significant issues noted in this board's report.
Where's the name of the board members? Which? Oh, thank you.
Yes, the board member exhibit, it's on the last page.
That's what I was going to bring up. Thank you. This letter is dated, on the very last page, is dated January 31st, 2023. As of this letter, all 3 members on the ABC board have expired effective April 12th, 2022. So they expired 7 months before this letter was written. Have they been reappointed? Do you know, or?
That we are aware of at this point, and we have checked.
Okay, so this is just someone clerically just saying these people's term has expired and,
Right, the term that they were appointed to serve expired and they haven't been reappointed by the governor.
is that on them as far as the administrator to make sure that that appointment is notified and gone through the process? Or is this on us to make sure that they are appointed?
It might be on the governor. It's on them.
It's on the governor, I think. Thank you, ma'am. If I'm not mistaken, would it be a correct statement that these individuals, appointees, are charged with the responsibility of serving until their successor's named?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, the term of office for each member appointed is 6 years from the time of his or her appointment and qualification until his or her successor shall qualify.
Any further questions on this report? You're recognized.
On page 33, item 2, one of the board member questionnaires was regarding the board needing 5 members with a 3-member board. Does anybody know what difficulty that would be, why that wouldn't be something we ought to do?
You asked why they changed it from 3 to 5?
No, why we wouldn't?
Yeah, because I mean, I'd read the thing where he talked about no member of the board can have a conversation with the other member
Right.
unless they're in a public meeting. It causes, we have that same problem in Mobile, so yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason that I know of.
Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Page 43 is where I'm at, and if some of these should be directed toward, the director or the firm that manages that for the ABC board, that's fine. Page 43, there's a couple of lines on there. One of them, because I know this entity has employees, but I'm curious on the personnel services for 2022 of $358,605. And then beneath that, under managerial for ARCO Services Corp. of $322,421 and 62 cents. I'm just not aware of what those two entities offer and what their services are, and that may be something I should ask someone else, but I'm just curious if you might know that.
I don't know, but I mean, we can look that up and let you know. We can let you know before Thursday.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious what services they offer to the board.
Sorry, I'm trying to stay out, but this is her first time, so I'm
Yeah, well, she's
helping
doing
her
great.
a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
she is. So your professional service, the more detailed part of that's going to be in the back. Now, we will need to ask on the,
He's on the appendix in the back.
right,
Okay,
okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm on page 43.
yes.
Yeah.
So we'll find out what ARCO provides, and then we'll have more detail about the personnel services, and we'll look and let you know what exactly that's for.
SBS billing is the same, that's on page 48, and it's $626,285. And this is my, naive rookiness, just trying to get a grasp on what these companies offer. That's all it is.
SBS billing, that is through OIT, but we'll find out exactly what it's for.
Okay, great. I don't even know what OIT is.
That's our Office of Information Technology
Gotcha.
for the
Okay,
state.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.
It's a state-created entity that everybody had to go to,
Okay.
but just in the last couple of years, wasn't it?
Yes, probably. Let me make sure.
Yeah, I'd still like to kind of know what they do.
What they did for that
Yeah.
28,000, we'll find out.
Right.
Madam Chair, one observation. I noticed on page 1 there that in 1936 they had extra sessions, whereas today we have special sessions.
Extra.
They didn't want it to be special.
All right, Representative Underwood, are you finished with your questions? Any other members have questions on this report? All right, Ms. Thomas, let's move on to the next one.
The next report we have is before the Behavior Analyst Licensing Board. This is a newer board. It was created in 2014. It's established within the Department of Mental Health, and it exercises licensing and regulatory authority over the practice of behavioral analysts. There are 7 members appointed to this board by the governor upon recommendations. There are 6 members currently serving. The public member position is currently vacant. This board does not have an administrator. This board also does not have any employees. Their funds are housed in our state treasury and a special revenue fund. There are no required distributions. They offer 2 types of licenses, a behavior analyst and an assistant behavior analyst. As of February 28th, 2023, they had 529 licensees. Their financial information can be found on page 12. And they had receipts of $70,495 during fiscal year '22. They had disbursements of $900. Their unobligated cash balance at the end of 2022 was $183,554.20.
I have a question about that.
You're recognized.
I hate to jump around, but when we're talking about financials, this is effective. On page 8, one of the significant issues from the prior was that 4 of the 5 board members responding say the board is not adequately staffed.
Yes, sir.
Based on those financials, would that be something that they can use that money to pay to staff it, or is that something that we have to approve, or?
They said that again this year. That came forward from thing that they do not think that the board is adequately staffed. They could.
But I mean, they have 178,000, right? Or is
They have
that
183,000 at the end of the year. Yes.
183,000? So I guess that'd be more of a question for them. Why can't they use the 183,000 to get some more staff if they feel they're not adequately staffed?
Yes, sir. Okay. The significant issues, they start on page 7. The first one is relating to the board's financial information. A review of the board's financial information revealed an unexplained discrepancy in instances of expenses incurred by the board being paid from another department's treasury fund. That other department is mental health. In fiscal year 18, licensing fees of $37,000 were collected and deposited into the mental health treasuries fund. The Department of Mental Health paid $1,600 of board expenses before the board's fund was created in the treasury, and then transferred $35,284 to the board's fund when it was created in the treasury. There was a difference of $200.98 between the amount that was actually collected, expended on the board's behalf, and then transferred to the board's fund. An explanation for this discrepancy was not provided. And then after the creation of the board's fund in the treasury, expenses of $294 in fiscal year 2019 and $884 in fiscal year 2020 were paid from the Department of Mental Health's funds rather than the board's funds. So that just, mental health paid some of their bills erroneously.
Would you say that that's because of a lack of oversight, maybe from not having a permanent staff person?
The type of funds that were paid, it was the ones that were paid outside of mental health fund. They were the first 2 were travel and postage for the board chair at the time, and then that was the $294.54, and the other one was insurance and bonding, and then travel again for another board member. And with them being housed in mental health, and then the person who did their books works for mental health. And I think it just is, it got coded the wrong way and didn't get paid attention to. And
I understand, thank you.
right.
What is the relationship with mental health? I mean, what do they?
This used to be housed within mental health, is the history that I understand. And then they were pulled out and this board was created. It was created in 2014. They had a fund set up in 2019 to separate the money. And now they still operate kind of under mental health. The person who does the accounting for them is a mental health employee, is my understanding. So they work for mental health, not for them. Their counsel also works for mental health. So the board is ran by the board members themselves.
can't help but wonder if it didn't work better with the, before 14. That's just an observation.
Senator?
Do you have any knowledge of why that this board was pulled out in 2014 or the rationale behind it?
I do not.
Okay.
You want-
Ms. Riddle?
I'm sorry, I don't know the history.
It's fine. It's my understanding that they were trying to beef this up with all the things going on with mental health crisis and stuff. And so they wanted to eventually move away and create their own board. And I think they were taking baby steps to do that. And I think that they're progressing still. I mean, the error, yes, but in the big scheme of things,
Right.
you know.
Thank you.
I would just like to, Madam President, I'd just like to note that somebody's got to be in charge of this, though. If the board members themselves are in charge of it, they don't have time to be doing everything they need to on the administrative side and operating this. It's just noted that we need to have somebody that's going to be in charge of this besides the board members, is my opinion.
Okay. The next significant issue that we have is similar to the one we discussed with psychology. It has to do with open meetings. There were 19 board minutes reviewed. 8 minutes did not record the time the meeting was held, the time it was called to order, or was it adjourned, excuse me. 4 meetings, the minutes were not signed off by an officer as required. All 6 board members participated in 3 meetings via video conferencing, establishing a quorum, and they did that after the governor's proclamation for COVID-19 ended, and that wasn't allowed at the time of those meetings. 2 meetings that were held indicated that board meetings attended via electronic communication and participated in executive sessions, and at the time those meetings were held, that was not allowed. The minutes of 4 board meetings required certain procedures be followed when they entered into executive session, and those procedures were not required, they were not followed, sorry. And then the board did not elect a chair in calendar years 19 and 20, and the law says that they're supposed to elect one every year. The same person just continued to serve for those years. They didn't stop and at a meeting formally select a chair.
Hang on a second. Was this tee up your question? Go ahead.
The next significant issue is subsequent to the passage of Act 2022-421, which was effective July 1st, 2022. The board held meetings in August and October of 2022 that established a quorum despite all 6 members participating via Zoom. The next significant issue is board vacancy notices on the Secretary of State's website were not in compliance with the statute. The board failed to post any notice for 9 vacancies that occurred during the sunset review period, and the board did not post a notice for a 10th vacancy until 9 days after the vacancy occurred. They're supposed to post those notices at least 45 days before the vacancy occurs. The 5th significant issue is the board system for handling complaints filed is inadequate. The board received 21 complaints during the sunset review period. 18 of these complaints remain open and pending. As of March 31st, 17 of the 18 open and pending complaints have been open for 12 to 42 months. And details of this is found in Appendix 2 of the report. And this appendix just goes through when the complaint was filed. And this was received directly from the board. And the status of the complaint that they told us, and then what the board action required is what they thought they needed to do. So they gave us this information, and it just lays out everything that they've got, and they have a lot of complaints open.
Madam Chairman,
You're recognized.
what is our, this is my first sunset also, so we're doing it together, right?
Okay.
But what is, as far as this goes, what's our authority? I know we're here to just kind of educate ourselves today, and we're having our full meeting on, I guess, Thursday, is that what it is?
Yes, sir.
Not tomorrow, okay. But going through that, I mean, it seems obvious to me that there needs to be somebody in charge of this board. Even if it stays under mental health, there needs to be somebody that's, I'm going to say like a director, and that they have to be staffed. If they have $184,000 in this, we need to figure out how they can start staffing this and not have complaints over a year long. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Karen, that tees you up. Legal responsibility of this Sunset Committee in response to his question.
You know, of course, you can pass legislation changing the board. You can keep an eye on the board and do frequent updates on it and just check back constantly. You've got a lot of teeth, and it's just a matter of what you want to do to them. Or fund them, well, they're self-funded, so you can't do that really, but.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. So mainly legislatively, correct? And then we can hit benchmarks if we wanted to, or this board so sees fit that we want to hit benchmarks every quarter, that you've got to at least clean this up and then go to the next one, so that hopefully within a year they're back to where they need to be. But it looks like this is a little bit of a mess.
Well, this would be the time when the appropriate time at the business meeting, you'd say that you wanted to bring them back in 1 year. You'd give them, at this tomorrow's meeting, you'd give them your helpful comments, would follow up with that in writing to them, and then you come back. We can frequently check into them if somebody wants to devote a pet project to this or be their focus. And then when we come back, we ask them for sunset, and we evaluate them annually until we get them to where they need to be.
Currently, boards and commissions that we evaluate for sunset that have significant issues, they are supposed to submit a quarterly update on the significant issues to kind of let us know where they are. And so this board would be required to start doing that. And if you want to make sure that you're added to the list to get a copy, we can do that. I believe it goes to most of you guys. They're supposed to do it quarterly, though, and update where they are on correcting their unresolved issues.
Recognized.
One of the things that I've noticed about the board is there's a lack of geographic diversity on this board. You have 3 of the 6 members are from the same city. I know there's no requirement that they have a geographic diversity, but is there anything we can do to kind of, lack of a better term, push them in the right direction to add some? I mean, do you know why Auburn is so specific to that? Is there something special in Auburn that does that, or is that just? No, I'm just.
No, sir. I don't know of a specific reason why they all are from Auburn, but there is no requirement, and you guys can make them have a geographic.
Well, there seems to be a concentration in Auburn, Jacksonville State, and Troy that does the education for
Yeah,
this.
those are the places that have the universities in place. So it may be that that's where the requirement to be on the board is that you have to, most of them are behavior analysts or somewhere in the field. So that might be where they could be found.
They do have the standard diversity language in their statute, what that's worth.
Continue on, or any other questions for, go ahead, Senator Kelly.
Yes, ma'am. So a lot of these functions here, basically, we need to take care of legislatively is what I understand you to say. And then we can basically put them on an annual review until those conditions are met. That'd be a correct statement. Thank you.
But I think we also need to start making, note of the quarterly reports, because I did in this last week start getting a bunch of them in my email and was going to compile that. So I think if you'll check your email, there's some quarterly reports from some prior years.
And I keep a checkoff list of who we get them from, and I have them if you guys want me to share those with you. If you'll let me know, I'll be happy to share those out. Okay. Is that it on this one?
Next one.
Okay. The next one is the Board of Examiners and Counseling. This board was created in 1979 to license and regulate professional practice of counseling in our state. This board is comprised of 7 members appointed by the governor, and those are selected from a list of candidates selected by the Executive Committee of the Alabama Counseling Association, 2 counselor educators, 3 counselors in private practice, and then 2 members of the general public. There is a geographical requirement for this board. They're not following it. No, sir. But there is one that they are supposed to have members from each congressional district. So this board has an administrator. They have an emergency contract with Smith Warren Management Services for administrative management and facility services. Keith Warren, who is the president of Smith Warren Management, serves as the board executive's director. The current contract amount through September 30th, 2023 is $282,000 to be paid in monthly installments of $23,500. This
I'm
board,
sorry, can you say that again? I just want to make sure I have that figure correct.
the current annual contract amount is $282,000.
282,000, that's to Mr. Keith Warren?
That's the, yes, Smith Warren.
Okay, that's $282,000 a year.
Yes, sir.
And I hate to jump around, but significant issue 2015, number 1 on page 9, was that they were not conforming with the geographic requirements.
Right.
From 2015. The Sunset Committee in 2015 said, you have problems with geographic committees. Currently, they have continued to not have this, they continue to not have geographic requirements is what they're still relying on what they're supposed to do as to everything else. They're still having the same issues that they were having in 2015, and Mr. Warren is being paid $282,000 a year, and that hasn't been addressed?
It's a significant issue in my report.
Yes, ma'am. I just
Yes, sir.
just saw that.
Okay. The board issues 4 types of licenses: a licensed professional counselor, an associate.
Can I jump in? They're operating under, are they still operating under emergency contracts?
Yes, sir.
How long have they had an emergency contract?
Their first initial contract began October 1, 2020 with Smith Warren Management Services.
So we've had an emergency since 2020?
Yes, sir.
For 3 years, we've had an emergency?
Yes, sir. Every time the letters say that the emergency was estimated to last no longer than 12 months. And the first was to relate to the transition between executive directors. And then the emergencies that were stated in the contracts the emergency was in place until proper bidding procedures were in place for those services.
Is this with Keith Warren personally or with his Keith Warren and Associates?
It's with Smith Warren Management. It's his company.
Smith Warren and Associates, okay. Because he was rather famous for constantly having emergency contracts and never going through the RFP process. I see his emergency contracts every month in contract review just about. So that's his modus operandus.
Following up on that, have they done the RFP procedures? Have they developed those?
We had an insurance conference this morning to finish up some of the one-year rollovers with Sunset, and he said that he did, and we are currently checking on that. I mean, I found that out right before we came over here, that he said that the RFPs have been released, including the one for this board, and we are checking on that to make sure.
So they currently have an RFP pending to fill the position? or
According to Keith, but I haven't verified that yet.
Would you be able to verify that before tomorrow?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. Yes, the RFP has been released by purchasing. Those procedures were not released from the new procurement office until March of this year. So that's what constituted the emergency and how we were facilitated. That was all done in between the board and the chief purchasing officer at the time. Of course, the office is now procurement office, and Ms. Kristen Cook is over there. So all the RFPs are out, but they did not release any procedures on how to do this until March of 2023. So that's what constituted the emergency. There was not a process that they had in place to be able to do that. So we have just now done that, and we have, they have issued 8 that I know of in the last 3 months. And counseling happens to be one of those. The board will be looking at those proposals that have been submitted through the procurement office at their board meeting on Friday.
Thank you.
I have only had them since September of 2020. So in 2015, when they started that, of course, that's something I inherited. They have a new executive director for the Alabama Counseling Association as well, and they have assured me, I gave them the code section, put everything in writing, and so we will be working together when they slate their candidates and ensuring that each of their nominations that they submit to the governor's office are each from a different congressional district, so that we do not have that, because this is going on way too long. And they acknowledge that, and they are willing to correct that expeditiously. So we have some new appointments coming up. So
Senator Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, ma'am. So you've been operating under an emergency contract essentially since when?
Since September of 2020. They hired me to manage the
2020, and
board.
this is 2023.
Correct.
And those emergency contracts are for a 12-month period,
They are for a 12-month period.
and we're still there. Thank you.
Simpson?
I have a question. When did you say you started?
September of 2020.
September of 2020.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm looking at some of these, specifically the appointment process, and we'll just say September of 2020 as the beginning. It looks like since you've been involved, there's been an appointment for Miss Robinson, which was appointed in October of 2022 from the 6th Congressional District.
Again.
When you already had a member from the 6th Congressional District, but that appointment occurred since you've been Executive Director, correct?
Yes, I do not
Okay.
see the nominations prior to them being submitted to the governor's office.
Okay, and it looks like there was also the same situation occurred from Dr. Crawford on the 3rd Congressional District in January of 2023, which would have been after you have been appointed, when they already had somebody from the 3rd Congressional District and Dr. Webb, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so since you've been since you've been in charge of this, you've appointed 2 people that already had somebody appointed from that district, or you've been involved with them. You've been the executive director since they've double appointed people from the same congressional district.
I don't appoint them, no, sir. I don't see the nominations. I communicate with the association, and they are statutorily required to submit the nominations. What we have agreed to is to start working together when they vet their nominees prior to submitting to the governor's office, that the nominees are not from the same congressional district, to eliminate that process. But I can't help if I don't see them. So the responsibility is with the Alabama Counseling Association, who submits the nominees. I'm trying to help facilitate the process.
So what do you do for the Alabama Counseling Association?
I'm the executive director, but
Okay,
of
so
the board, not the association.
Okay.
There's two
So
different entities.
You're the executive director of the board.
Board, and the Alabama Counseling Association is the one that submits nominations to the governor, not the board.
And you don't have any input with the Alabama
sir.
Counseling Association to say, hey, I'm the executive director of the board, and when we fill these vacancies, we need to make sure we have geographic diversity as is required by statute? You don't do that?
I have now put it in writing
Okay.
to even further get my point across in the last 2 years that I've been involved. Yes,
When you come in Thursday, would you bring those that you have in writing so we can see the dates on those, please?
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Warren, I want to thank you for clarifying. I understand we changed the procurement process, and you explained what the problem's been, and I want to thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
'Cause
Thank you.
When you brought it up, I remembered there has been a change in the procurement process over the last 2 years or so, so thank you.
I've been in a bad situation of knowing it's for a year, and, here I am, part of that process, but I'm not the approver of any of that. So it's been a bad situation, and myself, as a business person, I'm glad the procedures are in place for us to get these bids taken care of.
All right, stay close. Representative Underwood, did you have a question?
Thank you. So I've read on here on your report, which thank you for this. It's been I was up late last night because I was just enjoying going through some of the work you've done, and I know that sounds twisted, but yeah, I know that's just it's by nature.
It's okay, we understand each other.
Yes, ma'am. So I would be curious to see. I know we're talking about contracts and emergency contracts. I would like to see the contract. I've never seen it. I don't know what's involved in who does what and what the responsibilities are. Is there any way I could see one of those? Maybe the current contract that you're under.
The current contract I'm under is basically a letter, and it just spells out that I do all of the administrative management, blah, blah, blah. Under the new process, there will be an actual contract that is presented to procurement once the bids are finalized and submitted and vetted and approved. And then the contract is developed between the procurement officer, the board's legal counsel, and then it goes to contract review. So we are not there yet, but absolutely, once that document is prepared, I will be glad to share it with all of the Sunset Committee members. Absolutely.
That sounds good because I'm sure that would be more detailed. And
Yes, sir, it will be. Very detailed.
yeah, at the moment though, there is really no detail. It just says you will be the administrator, and that's pretty much it.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Because I noticed in the report it talked about management, administrative services, facilities, and equipment and logistics. And I didn't know any idea about what kind of hours are devoted, you know, what kind of maybe multiples, like not just you, but maybe people within your employment.
Right,
You
yes,
know,
sir.
I didn't know what all you're allocating to this particular board.
Correct.
And how to value, you know, that kind of service. And so
And
that's
that will
why
be
I'm
outlined this
so-
time.
Yeah,
How many employees are dedicated to that board?
Yeah.
And it's split up between administrative, executive, facilities, equipment.
okay, so I think I still like to see the letter, you know,
Sure,
just so I can have
absolutely.
it.
Yes, sir.
And I guess what that leads me to is, I just have two more, I'm sorry. This is a whole lot of background work for me.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Is I'm not sure how you arrived at the amount that you're charging based on the vagueness of the letter, which is why I'm trying to back into what you provided, you know, by means of whatever, employees, hours, you know, hours matter to me too.
Yes,
in
sir,
my business.
absolutely.
So I'm curious about how much time maybe that you might have done throughout the most current year, I guess would be good. And also, and this is also historical, because I see numbers rising like on revenues. I don't know if that means more licensees or if the rates went up per licensee. I'd like to know if during the last maybe 4 years, if the rates per licensee were increased to cover whatever cost or anything else.
There has not been a fee increase for your licenses.
Okay, so when we see numbers go up, that just means there's more people getting in the industry and more people. That's good. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm looking
Yes, sir.
for. And that's background for me, so I can kind of evaluate, you know, what those services are. And I appreciate you for doing that.
Yes, sir,
for me.
absolutely. And I'll have an overview of what we've gone through when the office was located in Birmingham and moving it to Montgomery. And Ms. Thomas and I had a conversation about that
Okay.
too, about the increase in revenue. So I'll have information to share, and I'll be glad to email that out prior to
Yeah.
the meeting on Thursday.
That'd be great. Will
Absolutely,
that come
thank
to you and then to us, or I'm not sure how it gets to me.
I'll send it to
Chairman Barfoot, and then they will distribute it.
How you doing, Chairman? Good to see you. Yes, sir. Doing well. Thank you for the time.
Yes, sir. Ms. Riddle, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to explain that not with just this one, but this is going to be a recurring issue that you're seeing with the administrative type services contracts. Historically, just so you'll know, and why it is incredibly confusing. Historically, purchasing has said that that was a non-professional service, and they allowed that just to go through a normal invitation to bid. Our department and legislative members a couple years ago really got on them and said, if someone is serving as an executive director, that is a professional service. And so we have worked for the past couple of years with finance, and now that has actually been codified in Senate Bill 100. I think it was Senator Orr's bill that says these types of contracts are in fact professional services. When you do that, that follows an entirely different procurement
Right.
process.
Right.
And so that's why there's a lot of confusion, and we've really been trying to work with the Department of Finance because they're the ones in control of all of that. I will say, any of these documents you ever want, we have our working papers and we can share with you. So please always feel free to reach out to Dixie on that. But historically, I wanted you to know this is going to come up with a lot of boards throughout the sunset process this summer.
Thank you. Representative Shedd?
Thank you. Mr. Warren, does this board have any, are there any state agencies or state departments that this board has interaction with, or the state agency or department that is kind of over them in any way? Or do they have?
It is an independent licensing board created by you, the legislature, and then they are overseen by the legislature and the Sunset Committee.
So don't have any connection with other state agencies such as mental health or anything like that?
No, sir. We work with mental health and we provide data to mental health, but they're not an overseeing. There are, now while we're on the topic, I mean, there are several mental health, and you visited one earlier, you know, so there's some options and availability to merge some of those together. Now, they'll tell you they're all distinctly different and all trained differently, but there are a lot of overlapping, and especially with this one in the Marriage and Family Therapy Board, you know, there's some overlapping there. So there's some availability to merge some of these. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Underwood, you're recognized.
I know it's back and forth. I apologize.
Like I said, some of us are very new to this board, so there is ask all the questions you want, in my opinion.
All right. Yeah. Amen. All right. Like Gordon said, we'll go through this together, won't we? Page 16 of this report, I noticed there was a reserve for year-end obligations. They're typically in the 20s, 30s, and 50s. Year-end of 21, 22 was 145. Do we know sort of what pushed that up so high?
I'm sorry, I don't know that right off, but I'll find out.
Okay. All right.
I'll find out and let you know.
Does your firm also do the accounting functions? Okay. So you
For which fiscal year? And I'll make a note.
2022.
2022? Okay.
Yeah, the year-end obligations, which is the accruals basically.
Yes, sir.
Was 145, 414, and that's significantly higher than the prior years. And I just was curious what we accrued
Right.
at year end.
Yes, sir. I'll get that.
That's all I have.
Senator Patrick?
We were just looking at the contract, or talking about the contract, and just looking at the significant findings. And Ms. Thomas, I think I'm correct in saying the significant findings, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 approximately significant findings in this process, right? The fees that, some of this is things you can, control, some of it you can't, as you were talking about, I understand. But for the contract amount that Smith and Warren Associates are getting paid, we expect there not to be any significant
Correct.
findings.
Yes, sir.
And I think we've been through this before, obviously. You've always been helpful. Anytime I've asked for something, you've given it to me immediately. I'm just letting you know, I'm just watching it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
The full story there is when I was hired to manage the board also hired an executive director who was a licensed professional counselor. And so he was the executive director and made some of these decisions. I will go over that. The finding number 1 about the employee who resigned but was overpaid, that was not under my purview. That was under his watch. So there's some things that I will explain and provide. And that's why I'm actually the acting executive director until the RFP process is completed and the board reviews those at their meeting. So, but yes, sir, we inherited a lot. We had a lot of work to do, but I can assure you, the next time, absolutely.
Keep going.
Okay, so on page 8, where the significant issues start, I'll just continue to go through those. Significant issue number 1, the board did not maintain accurate and current time records for a former employee receiving salary payments for periods not worked. The board had an employee whose last day of employment was July 20th, 2022. The former employee received a full paycheck for the pay period that was in, so she received a full paycheck for the pay period ending July 31st, 2022, instead of a partial payment. And then she also received full paychecks for the 2 pay periods following. So she got paid for the month of August, even though she no longer worked for the board. This was found, and this a net overpayment of $3,420. That came through also with our legal compliance examination of this board. We requested that money be paid back. This individual did not come to our hearing, and the issue has been forwarded over to the Attorney General's office, as is our normal process. So. Significant issue number 3, only 2 of the 7 board members responded to our request to complete a survey on matters pertaining to the board. All 7 members were mailed a letter from our office requesting participation in an online survey, and the letter explained the purpose of the survey and directions on how to complete it. We made this a significant issue because we think this is the board's time to say what they think is going on with their board, and it's their opportunity to let you guys know what they need and if they need something and what's affected them, and only 2 participated. The 4th significant issue has to deal with the board's approval of a contract for legal services not being documented in the board's minutes prior to the execution of the contract. The board entered into a contract for legal services effective March 1st, 2021 through February 28th, 2023. The contract was executed and the person was performing the services, and the board's documentation of approving the contract was not documented in the minutes. The Prior significant issues that are currently unresolved, we talked about one, the geographical issues with 2 members currently serving from congressional districts 3 and 6 when there are no representatives from districts 2 or 4.
Yes, ma'am. So this is dealing with the minutes of the previous significant issue.
Yes, sir.
If this is dealing with the minutes and Mr. Ward's company, is part of their responsibility in this is to review and comply, make sure the minutes comply at this time when this significant situation was found?
As of 2021, let me not tell you incorrect.
Or who was the responsible party? Because I understand the director has changed as well.
Yes, so Mr. Warren's company was contracted to provide administrative management facility services at that time, but there was an executive director on staff at that time too that was.
So who was responsible to make sure that the minutes were accurate during that time?
I do not know if it would be the executive director or Mr. Warren's company, but I will find out.
Okay, thank you.
They list their legal counsel as being Hindi Cootie, so I sometimes hold attorneys responsible for those matters.
Well, you've got to have internal oversight of that as well, though. Somebody's writing the minutes. So, thank you.
We'll find out.
No aspersions to the attorney. We're outnumbered in here, I think. We've got to add some humor. All right, keep going, or any questions at this point?
I have one final issue that was in this report. It was a finding from 2020. The board did not deposit checks in a timely manner. This came forward. We reviewed 358 checks, and 136 of those, or 38%, were deposited 6 to 19 business days after they were received. And that's just an internal control thing. You need to put the money in the bank a little more timely is why we're saying that.
Especially in the days of electronic deposits. You don't actually have to go to the bank anymore.
Right. Yes. I didn't go through in detail the emergency contract significant issue, but you guys talked about a lot. Do y'all want me to go through it? Yes? Okay. So this is significant issue number 2. And it's the board entered into multiple emergency contracts following the sudden resignation of the board's prior executive director in August of 2020 and the board's subsequent decision to move their offices to Montgomery in September of 2020. And the board is still currently under an emergency contract. The board entered into 2 emergency contracts right after this happened. One was for an executive director, Dr. Keith Cates, and he served, and then he was an employee of the board. He only had an emergency contract for a couple months. The emergency was estimated to last 60 days, and it fell that way. The next was an emergency contract for an academic reviewer. This is a thing that is required by statute for them to have. There was just one emergency contract for this, and then she's been contracted after that under non-emergency contracts. The next paragraphs just go through each of the emergency contracts, beginning with Smith Warren Management as they progressed forward. The first contract, we have it beginning as October 1, 2020. That is the date it is posted by finance. That's the date that we use of when it is happening. That contract was for $12,500 a month. The next contract was entered into in November. It was for 2 months for $15,000 a month for the months of October and November of 2021. The third emergency contract had a cost of $23,500 per month plus costs beginning in December of 2021, and that went through September 30th of 2022. This was the increase of $8,500 per month. And then the final emergency contract that they are operating under currently started on October 1st, 2022, and it runs through September 30th, 2023 at a cost of $23,500 per month.
Any questions of the members? All right, thank you so much. I'm now turning over the gavel. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Madam President, you said earlier anyway, there was a time, and again, I'm a novice at going through this, but there's a time when we talk about the review process and doing that for a year, 2 years, or 3 years. When does that happen? Does that happen today? Does that happen at the next meeting? When does that happen? Next meeting? Is that what you said? Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
I think traditionally, what we've done in the short period of time that I've been here is to have these types of meetings. We'll set the agenda for public comment and review on Thursday. We'll have one, same format next month for a different group, and then the following month, and then after we've completed all 3 monthly sessions of that, that's when we'll have a time to vote on whether or not what those extensions should be. Is that traditionally the way that's been done, Ms. Riddle? Thank you.
In your experience, you've seen it done both ways, either the day after the official meeting or in the end? Well, that'll be up to the pleasure of the chair, how he wants to do it this year.
Let's do that. I think that gives us a little bit more time to contemplate and read and look and talk about what we think, those changes and what the report, and then some of the findings that come in, some of the additional information that may trickle in, letters and stuff that's been asked for, that gives us a little bit more time to take a look at that. All right. Next committee is the is the Board of Electrical Contractors. You want to go ahead and give us a report or a summation? I don't know how we've been doing it before I got here, but let's do it the same way.
Yes, sir. The Board of Electrical Contractors was established by Act 1985, 921. This board licenses and regulates electrical contractors in our state. There are 9 members of this board. They are appointed by the governor. All 9 slots are filled at this time. Members serve 3-year staggered terms. This board also has an emergency contract with Smith Warren Management Services. Mr. Warren serves as the executive director. And the current contract amount is $420,000 at $35,000 per month. The board's funds are housed in our state treasury.
I hate to do it again. Can you say that again for me?
The current contract amount through September 30th, 2023 is $420,000. This is $35,000 per month. There are a requirement for unused funds with this board. Any unspent or unencumbered funds at the end of the fiscal year in excess of $100,000 must be transferred into the state general fund on or before January 15th of the succeeding year. This board issues 3 types of licenses. They have a total of 5,103 active licensees as of December of 2020. They have 98% of their renewals performed online. Their financials are located on page 14. In fiscal year 2022, they had revenues or receipts of $825,880 and disbursements of $911,596.
I'm sorry.
Representative Simpson.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I think I have this wrong, but I'm just checking. You said their receipts for 2022 are what?
$825,880.
What would be the professional services contract for 2022?
The amount paid for the 2022 contract amount, don't let me mistake.
Not for, I believe, for Smith Warren Services.
$420,000 was paid in 2022.
Half of the receipts go to professional services? Okay. Okay.
While we're on that, what'd you say the disbursements were? 911?
$911,596.
Thank you.
Ms. Thomas? Unless there are any other questions along those lines right now.
The significant issues for this board are on page 7. The first significant issue, the only current one, is 13 of the 23 licensees that responded to our survey, or 57%, indicated that the most significant issue currently facing their profession in Alabama is the shortage of skilled labor or qualified electrical contractors performing electrical work. The Next issue, I do need to let you guys know, there was a change. I found an error in my report. I apologize from what I emailed you. The current report you have in front of you is correct, but there is a change from what I sent you out a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And that is in the second line under current status, that $8,000 number. It says $15,488.04. The ones that you were emailed said $8,000. So this issue has to do with reporting encumbrances and accounts payable at the end of the fiscal year to the comptroller's office. This was an issue in 2020 in the legal compliance examination, and so we followed up. The board encumbered $24,161 at the end of fiscal year 21. They expended $15,488.04 in the next fiscal year. That's a difference of $8,673. The board encumbered $63,357 at the end of fiscal year 22 and expended $41,585.40. That's a difference of $21,772. Additionally, at the end of fiscal year 2021, the board's unreserved cash balance was $253,000, yet the board transferred $177,765.54 to the state general fund, which was more than they were statutorily required to do because they're only supposed to do the amount over $100,000. Further, at the end of fiscal year 22, the board's unreserved cash balance was $128,691. However, the board transferred $9,419.32 to the state's general fund, which does not meet the amount statutorily required.
Let me ask you something. I heard you call out those numbers, but they overpaid
They overpaid one, and then they underpaid the next time, and the differences don't match up.
They didn't, okay.
It didn't appear to offset that way.
Okay. That was my question, yeah.
Yes. Okay. On page 8, if you turn over, there was a prior finding in the legal compliance examination from 2020. The board adopted an administrative rule to issue and charge a $75 fee for a provisional license that is not authorized by statute. The board continues to issue and charge fees for a provisional license. The board has initiated legislation to correct this several times without success. So the board is charging a fee for a provisional license, and there's nothing in the statute that allows for it.
Representative Stinson.
So wait a second. There was a prior finding in 2020 of the Sunset Committee, or of your examination, that said statutorily you are not authorized to collect these fees. I understand they may have presented legislation to try to change that. However, are you telling us that in the 2022, their current status, they are still collecting these fees?
Yes.
We're going to need somebody to come and answer on that specifically tomorrow. Or Mr. Warren, are you the director of that? Could you come add to this conversation? Do you mind?
No.
So a provisional license was added in 2010 when the statute was changed, and as you can see in my response, the number of years we have presented legislation to correct this. However, this provisional license does keep people working in the areas. Now, we can stop, but I mean, it's a license that's been created. Senator Coleman Madison and I had this conversation last year, and she remembered why, and we do continue to, but we've got to issue the license. We can stop issuing the license, and they wouldn't have, and we'd be putting people out of work. So we're trying to keep people working on that license.
How much money do you make from that license?
Just $75.
How much money do you make total? How many people are paying that license?
565 people.
Hold on just a second. I just want to do this real quick.
Sure.
565 people are paying $75. So that's $42,375. Okay, so we're going to put people out of work so you can continue to make $420,000 a year, knowing that the statute does not apply, does not give you that authority, and continuing to do so even though legislation has failed.
Mr. Chairman, can I be recognized?
Yes, ma'am.
So what would they do if the license was not being authorized? Who would do that work?
they would have to go and hire a licensed electrical contractor who is a statewide contractor that has the authority to work all over the state. A provisional is just an individual that is limited to the area that they were licensed previously to the law changing in 2010.
Are there ways for the counties to issue those?
We could go back and make that change statutorily, but I mean, it's going to require a statutory change.
I'm just asking questions. I don't
Right,
have
yes.
any recommendation for what we need to do. I'm just trying to flesh out.
But not all counties issue a license for electrical. Not all counties have electrical licensing divisions.
Okay.
Senator Kelly?
Okay, so you're gonna have to help me here, but.
Yes, sir.
So, we have a known law that has been ruled that this is in violation of that law. And the continued actions from the time that has been aware is that it is knowingly and willfully violated that law ever since and continues to this day. So you have a board that this body is responsible for, and their leadership or advisory or consultant, management fee, whatever, everyone knowingly violating that law, even though there have been attempts to try to rectify that unsuccessfully. So we have a knowingly organization that is violating this law willfully. Is that a correct statement?
Unfortunately, that is correct. Yes, sir.
And who ultimately is responsible for making that decision to violate that law?
The board and myself taking directions from the board.
I'm not an attorney, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but it seems like that there is a type of fiduciary duty somewhere here being violated. And so the board's responsibility is to make sure that's not been done. Yours is the management of that responsibility, and basically neither one cares.
Say we didn't care, we've just
Made the decision to actively violate it. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Any more questions along those lines?
I have a question for legal. What are the duties of the Sunset Committee as far as potential, if we just say we're not going to renew this board?
Pass legislation to either terminate them or don't pass any legislation at all, and they'll terminate on their own.
Chairman.
Senator Gager?
So going through this a little bit last session anyway, part of that is that it sunsets because we don't agree on anything in the House and the Senate. The other part of that is there was a bill that I think Senator Chris Elliott said was putting under the Secretary of State and letting it be ran underneath there. And so that's another option that I know he's bringing back because he told me about it yesterday. But those are the only two options that I know of anyway.
I think there's another one possibly in the works as well.
Senator Van?
I have a question just on how things would work on this committee. Like in Joint Legislative Council, it takes 6 House members and 6 senators to basically pass anything, okay? Is there a balance, so many House members, so many senators, or just a majority vote? How does it work on Sunset?
Not a balance. Doesn't take a specific number from each body. Members, any other questions about that? If not, we'll let Ms. Thomas continue. Okay.
Sorry. That's the last significant issue I have for that board.
All right. Representative Underwood.
Mine is regarding the encumbrances again. I see that there are some inconsistencies from year to year on what the accruals were versus what they are. That didn't sound right. What the accruals were estimated to be versus what they actually were. And I noticed on page, well, it's actually in your response, so I don't know, it's going to be at the bottom, that the encumbrance of the board are determined by the chief financial officer and closely estimated for outstanding expenses for the month of September, the 13th accounting period. The CFO, that basically is what your firms that we're talking about,
Correct,
or
yes,
was there a CFO prior to you?
All right.
That's, yeah, so the reporting, and I understand it ends in September, and then you have October, and then I think I read somewhere where the requirement to go to the general fund is in January the 15th, like 3.5 months later.
Right, they have to do the transfer of anything over the 100,000 by January 15th.
Okay. So I guess that's kind of where my question was going, that those estimates that aren't falling in line exactly, could they be, more exactly stated in the financials prior to the January 15th, transfer of the funds from that to the general?
And that's what Ms. Thomas and I are going to work on. When we discuss this, I get the number directly from the comptroller's office. And so they're
Okay.
the same department that we send over the encumbrances for.
Okay.
And so they give me that number that's highlighted, and I gave Ms. Thomas those reports.
Okay, so that comes
that's
from...
That comes from them, but we want to
Yeah.
determine how more closely we can get on the amount encumbered, so we're not off on what is due in the general fund. So, but if it's over, then it reverts back and would count
Right.
towards the next revision to the general fund in the next coming year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess my point was I was hoping it could be done within the 3.5 months so that there wouldn't be any,
Discrepancies.
appearances of.
Right, and
Yeah.
that's what we're going to work
Appearances
on.
So
Ourselves.
I guess my confusion is the comptroller's office. I mean, I'm assuming they receive invoices, they key the invoices in with a due date of October or November, and I just assumed that those numbers would be easily attainable as opposed to inconsistent, I guess is where I'm going.
Well,
But I'm not aware of the process, so.
okay. And I did tell Mr. Warren that we would show him exactly where we came up with this and how
Well,
we followed
I
it through
trust your
the-
numbers, yeah.
through the financial statements that we do pull from STARS,
Yeah.
from the comptroller's office. And the amounts that they say that they're gonna encumber, they make that determination and they have to let the comptroller's office know in some capacity what they're gonna have to encumber or have for accounts payable. And then what they pay in the 13th accounting period is either right or wrong.
Yeah.
And we just like for it to be closer than $20,000 off, especially when it's something that's coming forward.
Yeah.
And then for transferring the money, the amount that was transferred, the $9,000 amount, was actually like the same amount from 2 years before. And so it just seemed somebody maybe made it just an error.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just not the right amount based on what the financial statements show.
So please understand that I trust your numbers fully. My question was not about your
Yes, sir.
your numbers. It was a question about the process of. It seems like to me that's easy to get the exact number. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult to get the exact number by the 13th month.
I agree.
Yeah. So I don't know the process, but those numbers come from the state's comptroller's office, who is handling, I'm sure, a lot of things. But it just looks. It just doesn't look good for
It looks
not to
bad.
be. Yeah,
And we
it
want to
does.
make sure that it is the exact amount.
Yeah.
And so the three of us, between Ms. Thomas, the comptroller's office, and our accounting department with myself, will be
Yeah.
coming up with that exact number.
Yeah,
And see
I
where
like
the
that better.
discrepancies are, because it should not be this hard. You should subtract 100,000. That number is transferred to the general fund.
Well, it's that plus just the income, just the estimates of the monthly expenses that were accrued in the last month, paid in the next month. That's part of it too. That's kind of what I was talking about.
Right.
But when you get that number right, then the number going to the general fund should be exactly right, and it's just cleaner. So I'm just asking questions on those numbers being off, but they never seem to self-correct by the next year, which sometimes they will self-correct, but I don't see any of these self-correcting. It's just estimates as opposed to invoices, I guess. But anyway, that helps a lot knowing sort of how that process works. Yeah. Okay.
Do you have a consistent contact in the comptroller's office that you work with?
We do, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's not like there's been a changeover?
ma'am.
I'm just still trying to flesh out what would be going on.
There's been some change in his department. In fact, there's another new one this month. So there's been changes in his department, but not, he's been in that position for quite some time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Goodger?
Thank you. Who is that person in the comptroller's office? that you
Randy
deal with?
Head.
Randy. And then this next question is from Ms. Thomas. Most of these other boards, and honestly, everyone we've gone through, you've said something about Open Meetings Act or posted minutes. Is there anything in this particular, because I don't see it in here.
We didn't have any issues with this
Okay,
board. with
just
that.
wanted to make sure. Good job.
Thank you.
Representative Shedd? And then Representative Simpson.
The members of the, may you remember, may not, my pet peeve about a lot of the boards that we review is not their faults, but it's in the laws, is that on the general fund, I personally don't think it's right for the general fund to be funded by the licensees of the state being overtaxed or taxed again when they've already paid taxes like everybody else does. And yet then we tax them again by whatever fines or whatever these goes into the general fund. For example, on this board, everything over 100,000 goes back into the general fund, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's just a pet peeve that I have. I just don't think the general fund should be funded that way. But that's a legislative issue, just so I'll voice that when I have an opportunity, as I do right now. The second thing is that I'm always concerned about boards using the regulation authority that they have to control competition. So those are worries that I have, and I like to see boards demonstrate to us what they're doing to prove to us that they're not controlling competition and eliminating competition. You know, I think competition's good in everything except legislative races, you know. But
Good point, Representative Shedd. Representative Simpson?
Ms. Thomas, as we sit here today on July 18th, 2023, is it fair to say that all 9 members of this board are serving on expired terms now?
Sorry.
And we're working on that as well for reappointments.
Members, any other questions, concerns? Ms. Thomas, anything else to report?
No, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Board of Heating and Air Conditioning Refrigeration Contractors. Ms. Thomas, you have the floor.
Thank you. I may call this the Board of Heating and Air because it's got a really long name, guys.
Yeah.
It used to be even longer. They used to be the roofing and sheet metal contractors as well. This board was created in 1978, and they had their name changed in 1982, and they regulate the installation, service, and repair of refrigeration systems in our state. This board consists of 12 members, 4 are appointed by the governor, 3 by the lieutenant governor, 4 by the Speaker of the House, and 1 is appointed by the President Pro Tem of the Senate. Members are subject to confirmation by the Senate. The members serve 4-year staggered terms. The administrator of this board is Jeffrey B. Kraft. He is the executive director. He is appointed by the board with the approval of the State Personnel Board. Their funds are also housed in our state treasury. They have a requirement for unused funds at the end of the year. All funds remaining at the end of a fiscal year which exceed 25% of the board's budget for the previous year shall be transferred to a nonprofit, the Alabama Home Builders Foundation, to be used exclusively for classroom training, tools, and educational facilities that provide heating and air conditioning curriculums. We didn't have any issues with that. They didn't actually have any problems with those kind of distributions. They followed them like they were supposed to. The board issues 4 different types of licenses. As of December 22nd of 2022, they had 5,342 active licenses. They had 1,108 inactive for a total of 6,450. They do a heating and AC contractor, an apprentice, a refrigeration contractor, and then a duct air tightness testing contractor. Examinations for being able to obtain these licenses are administered by schools located in the state of Alabama. The information for the exams are located on page 37 in Appendix 3 of this report. The financials for this board can be found on page 14 of the report. The board took in receipts of $1,283,000 for fiscal year '22, and they expended 1.3 million of those dollars. They have an available cash balance at the end of the year of $378,000, and that's for 2022. The significant issues we have for this board are as follows. There were two current ones. The first one is the board amended their administrative rules to repeal rules related to the registration and associated fees of apprentices despite the board statutes providing for these fees. So the board statute says that they have to, fees for apprentice registration and annual renewal fee shall not exceed $50. The board shall register every person who may apply for an apprentice heating, air conditioning, or refrigeration registration certificate. So as a result, if a citizen sought to be licensed as an apprentice, the board wasn't offering this option to them. The next significant issue is the board statutory authority needs a technical correction. And I'm on page 7 if y'all are looking. Section 343126D states in part that in the event a contractor completes in excess of 4 hours of continuing education in a calendar year, he or she may carry over 4 years to the following renewal year. That second year needs to be changed to hours. So it just needs a technical correction in the code. We did have one prior finding come forward. It was from 2021 regarding the board not notifying the Secretary of State of scheduled vacancies on the board at least 45 days prior to the expiration of people's terms. The board did not notify the Secretary of State at least 45 days prior to the expiration of a board member's term that expired on June 30th, 2022. The notice was not submitted until December 6th, 159 days after the vacancy occurred. This could cause potential candidates not to receive sufficient notice and cause the board not to receive input from all interested candidates to fulfill the vacancy on the board.
Members? Any explanation as to why? What was the 159 days had passed from when that notification should have been, actually, would have been more than that, from when it was, when the terms expired to the time the notification was submitted that a vacancy had occurred? You back that up another 45 days, and is when it should have been sent in. Is that correct?
Yes. And so they didn't really provide us with an explanation of why it happened, and they didn't in their response either.
Okay. Representative Wilcox.
Can I go to your first finding? So by not offering that, they actually prohibited people from getting to work?
They could have, yes, because the law says that you shall offer this license, that if somebody wants to come in and obtain this, like this type of license as an apprentice, that they should be able to do that, and they didn't offer it. And now their response will show in the back that they did offer up an administrative rule to correct this in February of 2023, but they didn't have one. It wasn't offered, and the statute says they shall do so.
And does their website reflect any of this information, or how do they disseminate this information?
To the public?
Mm-hmm. And to their contractors?
I'm not sure of that. That might be, they might could answer that better, of how they get the information out to the public. Or I can
Okay,
try to find
we
it.
can get that tomorrow, maybe?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I mean, Thursday, excuse me. Thank you.
Well, members, any other comments, concerns, questions? Okay. Up next is Liquefied Petroleum Gas Board. Ms. Thomas?
All right, the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Board, we refer to it as LP Gas. This was created by Act 1965. It regulates the safe handling, distribution, storage, and transportation of liquefied petroleum gas. This board is composed of 8 members. 5 members are appointed by the governor. 1 is from the general public, and 4 representatives of the the LP gas retail industry. Those permit holders, they're appointed from a list of nominees, and the governor appoints those. 3 are ex officio members, and they hold a seat based on the office that they serve: the state fire marshal, the director of public safety, and the president of the Alabama Public Service Commission. The administrator is Dwayne Whidden. He serves, he's appointed by the board and serves as an administrator with approval from the State Personnel Board. The board employs 9 people. They have 2 funds that are maintained within the state treasury. They have an operating fund and a research and education fund. They do have required distributions. The amounts in the operating fund that are in excess of $200,000 at the end of each fiscal year are required to be transferred over to the gas research and education fund. Their financials can be found on page 14. They took in receipts of $1.4 million for fiscal year 2022, and they expended $1.6 million. This included a $300,000 transfer over to the Education and Research Fund. Their unobligated cash balance at the end of the year is $301,666.37. They offer 10 classes of permits. They're wholesale and retail and different types of retail of how you transport and hold and sell different types of gas, the LP gas, inspection, containers. Those are all found on page 4. As of September 30th, 2022, they had 968 total permits issued.
Representative Wilcox?
What is the transfer amount, research and education fund? Do we have something in here outlining what that is? And
Yes.
could you expound upon that, please?
Sorry, I can't see right now. It is on page 12. The Research and Education Fund is established under section 97104, and it funds research and development and training, the implementation of marketing, advertising, and information programs relating to LP gas.
It still didn't tell me anything.
Sorry, what?
Well, I'll find out some more tomorrow when we have some, will
Okay,
they be here?
Okay. Do you want me to try to find you some more information about
Yeah,
it?
please.
Okay.
Like what they spent the money on and.
Okay. Their financials can be found on page 17. And it says that they have spent $117,000 on grants and benefits, but we can get you some detail on what made up that number. Okay. The significant issue we have with this board can be found on page 6. The board is not accurately reporting its encumbrances and accounts payable at the end of the fiscal year to the comptroller's office. For fiscal year, at the end of fiscal year 22, the board encumbered $117,000. They expended $24,000 in the next fiscal year. That's a difference of $93,000. In 2021, they encumbered $202,000 and expended $105,000. That's a difference of $96,000. And then in 2020, 164 versus 20, which is $143,000. They did this in the last 5 fiscal years. And so had they calculated this more closely and done this more correctly, the amounts that they would have transferred over to this research fund would have been higher. Maybe they could have used it for more grants or however they wanted to.
Representative Underwood?
Yes, sir. Those are large misses. I mean, it's not even, I mean, it's such a large miss there that bothers me. Those bother me greatly. And I mean, I don't want to say willful, but the appearance of willful is at least there on those numbers being so off. I am curious, though, at this point, should these numbers, like they are determined and they are listed and they are the 93, 96, 140 something, 97, 102, will there, at this point, is there a way that we can say, here's the total that was misrepresented, move that money today? Is there any procedure in place that says, you've missed it all these times, here's what's due, transfer the money today, or tomorrow, or next month, or whatever?
We could look into that because we'd want to make sure that we didn't overstep somewhere with receipts coming in different fiscal years, but we could see if you wanted us to look at that and see if that's possible.
I'm just curious if there's any corrective action that's typically in place for you know, they obviously have missed, you know, close to $500,000 at this point. Is there any corrective action that's typically in place that says, whatever it takes to confirm, now move the money?
Ms. Riddle, do you want to address that?
Yes, it will not come up in your sunset review. We just bring it to your attention in your review, but it will come up in what's called our legal compliance examination. And under that examination, there is a procedure. I would charge the board. And then we'd go through this whole process of having a hearing, and the board's responsible for those types of things. Generally, if we go through that process, we don't have to get there. They fix it before I charge them. But we do, in a lot of instances, have to get there.
Can you define for me what you mean by charge them?
Not a criminal charge.
Yeah.
It is like a settlement of charges. It's funds that we see need to be fixed, or in some cases, it can be criminal. We get into that in some instances, but with agencies, it's generally like making them do their settlements correctly.
Yeah, that's good, because I really would don't want this to be fixed. What is their cash balance current? I should have that right in front of me somewhere, but.
Oh, it's on page 14. The unobligated cash balance at the end of the year is $301,000.
They don't have enough. Right?
We should be doing a legal compliance on them very soon, and we will check into that.
Okay.
And let you know.
Will this board be able to get notice of that legal compliance as well as any others that are done on any boards or commissions within our purview?
Sure. We
Okay.
can make sure that you get copies sent to you when those are completed and when they're released. We can make sure that all the members of the Sunset Committee get copies of them.
I'd like
every
that,
time
not
we do
just,
one.
I think across the board, that may be something we want to discuss further, but I think that's a valuable tool that we have.
Sure.
Outside of what the sunset, if we could look at the legal compliance.
Right,
as
there are
well.
things that come up in legal compliance that would be helpful
Okay.
to know, so, sure.
Thank you.
I have one more, please.
Representative Underwood.
Thanks, sir. The last question is on fiscal year 2022 regarding professional services, and I see on page 16 that they are between administrative, data processing, and legal. Now, I'm going to assume the data processing is with the state. I've forgotten our acronym already. Was it OIT?
OIT.
Thank you. The 146 is a pretty big jump from priors, and I was just curious what constituted, you know, a $100,000 increase from one year to the next.
I will find out what OIT charged them for, how they categorized it.
Is that a service charge? I mean, do they get anything physical with that?
OIT
or-
does things like help host their websites in some cases, and they provide, I lost my word.
It's okay.
They
It's just a
they
service
provide
provider,
services
right?
to the
Yeah.
thing, and they bill them for those
Yeah.
services.
Okay. Yeah, so they don't really acquire an asset of any kind. They're just, yeah. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, anything else?
That's all I have.
That's good. Thank you. Members? Questions, comments, or concerns? All right. Next on the agenda is the Board of Funeral Services. All yours, Ms. Thomas.
All right, the Board of Funeral Services, they were created in 1975. They regulate procedures for making final disposition of the human dead, including cremation, embalming, and funeral directing. The board inspects funeral home establishments and investigates complaints. The board had some pretty substantial legislation in the last couple of years that made some changes to them. Those are included in your report. That is why this one is so large. We wanted you guys to have copies of those acts. And we can answer any questions that are in those if you guys have them. The board is composed of 9 members. Those 9 members, that will change with the implementation of Act 2023. 94, it expanded the board. But as of right now, it is 9 members, 7 professional members that are appointed by the governor, 2 consumer members, 1 appointed by the lieutenant governor, and 1 by the Speaker of the House. They do have a geographical issue. No more than 1 professional member of the board may reside in the same district. And those districts are created by statute, but they are identical to the congressional districts that we have in our state. 2 consumer members on the board may not reside in the same congressional district either. The administrator of the board is Mr. Charles P. Ryan. He serves as the executive director. He is hired by the board. His salary is set by the board and with the approval of the governor and the state personnel board. This board has employees also. They have 4 employees outside of their executive director. The funds are housed in the state treasury. They have the Alabama State Funeral Service Fund, and then they have a funeral board property acquisition fund. They do have a required distribution as well. No later than May 1st of 2022, the executive director shall transfer from the Alabama State Funeral Service Fund to the property acquisition fund an amount to be determined by the vote of the board to purchase real property. And thereafter, the board shall annually, during the month of October, transfer an amount between 2% and 7% of the receipts of the board from the previous fiscal year to the property fund. This board issues 9 types of licenses. As of February 24th of 2023, they had 3,654 licensees. These include establishments, mortuary services, and then directors, embalmers, cremationists, etc. The financials for this board can be found on page 20. The receipts for fiscal year 2022 were $858,937. The disbursements were $503,024.25. Their unobligated cash balance at the end of the year is $1.7 million. There is a large increase in 2022. There were some rule changes in the requirements to be an apprentice funeral director and apprentice embalmer that seem to encourage more people to be licensed as apprentices in both of those categories. We saw an increase in that, and you'll see it in the performance statistics that can be found on page 13. In the last year, they went from 84 apprentice embalmers to 146, and then from 146 apprentice funeral directors to 250. So that was a big increase. They are also going to have an increase of fees. The fees that are shown on pages 18 and 19 are what the fees currently are. That increase happened as of October of 2023. We saw a big increase in revenues coming in September of 2022. It appears the licensees renewed before the new fees started. That's what it seems like. There was a big jump in revenues in just that last month. The significant issues for this board can be found on page 11. There are 3 of them. The first one deals with the board not transferring funds timely from the Alabama State Funeral Service Fund to the Property Acquisition Fund as required by statute. As I said earlier, they were supposed to do an initial transfer by May 1st of 2022. They made a transfer of $36,000 on November 4th of 2022. Just pointing out that they did that 6 months after their deadline. The second significant issue is that the board has not filed oaths of office with the Secretary of State for any of the board members currently serving as required by statute. The statute says that they shall be filed with the Secretary of State. We checked with the Secretary of State and those were not on file. The third significant issue is 3 of the 6 board members responding to our survey stated that the most significant need currently facing the board is the regulation of pre-need services. Act 2023-94 addressed this in this last session. So that should take care of it.
Let me ask you this, why is that a significant finding? The third one.
That they asked for it?
That 3 of the 6 board members responded to the survey that the most significant issues facing the board is the regulation of pre-need service. Why is that in the significant finding category?
Well, I think traditionally what we have done is point out when they respond to the surveys, if a majority of the people say something, we just want to bring it to y'all's attention. So had it not passed in this last session, it would be the board members said in their survey responses that they thought that this was something that was needed. And so if they respond to our survey and a lot of them all say the same thing, we pointed out. So it's not always a finding in a bad sense. This is just what happened. It's not necessarily right or wrong all the time. It's just this is an issue that we think that we want to bring to your attention that they asked for this.
Senator Gavan?
I don't remember which one it was, but one of the board overwhelming response was that it was an undue burden on their industry. So, I mean, I think we need to pay attention to those and listen to what the people in the industries are saying. I mean, we may or may not agree with it, but I think it's worthy of consideration.
No, I don't disagree with that. The placement and significant findings as opposed to somewhere else in there. I mean, to me, a significant finding is they're not doing what they're supposed to do as opposed to here's what we believe should be done or needs to be done. Just,
Something they're doing wrong.
right.
And that's, you know, you guys are at liberty to change how we set that out if you want a different section in the future years to say something different. You can tell us how you want us to do that, and we can do that and put it somewhere
I
different.
just don't want that to be used against, a board or, a committee, commission, whatever, to say, hey, there was 3 significant findings when one of them
Wasn't really anything they did
wasn't
wrong.
really that they had done anything
Yes.
wrong, so.
I've tried to, when we have something like that is said, like this, that they said there was a need for it, if it's already kind of been rectified because you guys passed the legislation this past session, to include that there. So, and even if they report something that we look into and we don't find, if they say that something was wrong, complainants or somebody say, well, we don't think they did this right, and we test and we find that the board did in fact do all the things that they were required to do, we try to say, the licensee said this, and here's what our testing showed, because that's fair.
Senator Van?
It might be more appropriate just to be designated as, board expressed needs or concerns. And that way, it's not as a, again, it could be used to hammer by piling on when it's not a real pile on.
Sure. That's kind of what I was thinking as well. Members? Representative Rafferty, I've been here about 30 minutes. Jump in there, say something.
I agree. So I'll say this, that for me, there's a couple of things that I know that I need to look at in each of these books when I have one in front of me. And one of them is significant issues. And there's a big old sigh of relief when I get to just say no significant issues. And then we can look at what the board wants and how we can improve the operating of it. But, so I agree that kind of makes it a little confusing, so.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
That's helpful.
Great.
Thank you, sir. Representative Underwood.
Sir, one quick question. What does the property acquisition fund do? Is that for like purchasing cemeteries or?
Yes, I think, let me tell you so I don't get it wrong.
Sorry if I've missed that in the paperwork.
The funeral board actually bought a property, and that is what it was for, and they bought it.
Oh, for themselves, for their
You'll
facilities,
see
their
a
office.
change in
and-
like their
Gotcha.
facilities with their professional
Okay.
services. Things changed, and that is, a lot of it changed when they got into a building.
Okay.
Instead of renting from someone, their professional services been
All right.
changed up too.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir, Representative Shedd.
We passed this bill, and it's 93 pages. I'm particularly interested in, will be tomorrow, asking for anybody today, your for-profit cemeteries. Did any of that address can anybody tell me, did we address with that law that we changed, anything about for-profit cemeteries? I know we've had a real situation in our area with that, and I'm sure others will be if you haven't already in your areas, if you have any. Just basically letting them go in disgrace, do you know if there's, if that
I do not know.
93-page
I can
law that we
Read
passed?
it again and look for that specifically.
Okay. Anybody else know? I'll ask.
I remember we passed a bill about cemeteries or funeral directors, but the last couple of weeks have been a blur, and you start to lose context of what
Me
those.
too. Me too.
Karen?
I think the year before their bill addressed that, but this one pared it back to just address some issues with pre-need and other things with the board.
Nobody
They'll
wants
be
that
there to,
responsibility. I don't know that for all along.
you might be
but
right.
Hoping somebody did. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, comments, questions, concerns? All right. Hearing none, move to, looks to be the final agenda item, Electronic Security Board of Licensure. Ms. Thomas.
All right. This board was created in 1997 to regulate persons and business entities who engage in sales, service, installation, maintenance, or monitoring of intrusion, burglar alarm systems, closed circuit, television systems, electronic access control systems, or locksmith services. This board is composed of 6 members who are appointed by the governor and subject to confirmation by the Senate. This board contracts with RT Management, a private management firm, to provide management, administrative services, facilities, equipment, and logistical support. Janet Robinson, the president of RT Management, serves as the board executive director. The board's annual contract amount through the end of fiscal year 2023 is $295,200 to be paid in monthly installments of $24,600. This one was bid in fiscal year 2021. The board issues 8 types of licenses. As of March 9th, 2023, they had 5,960 licensees. Their financials start on page 16. Their receipts in 2022 were $452,000. Their disbursements were $401,000. Their unobligated cash balance at the end of the year was $567,549. They don't have any required distributions or any specific uses of their unused funds. There were 3 significant issues noted in this report. These all have to do with responses to our survey. 32 of the 42 individual and company licensees responding to our survey stated that the mandatory continuing education is not necessary. Qualifying agents, installers, locksmiths, salespersons, and helpers are all required to complete 16 hours biannually. That was 76% of those responding who said that. The next one is 20 of the 42 individual and company licensees responding to our survey answered yes to the question of, do you think any of the board's laws, rules, and policies are an unnecessary restriction on your profession? So 48%. And then 12 of the 42, or 29% of the individual and company licensees responding to our survey believe the most significant issue facing their profession is unlicensed individuals performing work. In addition, 7 of the 42 believe that the lack of enforcement of the laws and rules of the policies is the most significant issue.
Members, questions, comments, concerns? Representative Simpson.
Just to be consistent, so we can all be on the same page as part of this work session. She's telling us, and I'm trusting your numbers are good. Their total receipts are $452,000, and their total contract for services for professional facilities administration and management is $295,200.
Yes, sir.
So once again, we're talking 2/3 of the money that these people are paying goes straight to the management services and not to the purpose of what we're doing.
Representative Wilcox.
I know that some of the members here attended the Southern Legislative Conference, and when we attended their session, some of the ways to evaluate whether there needs to be a board overseeing this are the amount of complaints and the nature of the complaints. So the complaints are on page 13. So only in 1 year did they really have no complaints in 2022 and a rash of them in 2021, but nothing before that.
Yes, ma'am, that's what was reported to us. And in the ones for 2021, there were 24 complaints filed and 21 were against the same company.
Okay, well, I would just like to present this is that one of the, I guess it was Governor Youngkin of Virginia was saying that that is one of the ways where they reduce red tape and regulation was what are the types of complaints and if there were any complaints, and then perhaps this might be one of those considered that don't need as much regulation. I just put that out for information and consideration.
Fair point. Members, any questions, concerns? Representative Underwood?
For consistency's sake, like we just heard, I am curious about the value of the contract on this one as well and how it's measured, and I would like to see what this contract looks like as well. And I don't know, is this one an emergency contract too, or is it?
No, sir. There's been a master agreement in place beginning October 1st, 2021, and it has the options to go through, be renewed a second, third, and fourth, and fifth term. So
That's great. I would like to see it as well.
Yes, sir, we can get you a copy of it.
Thank you much.
And just so I'm clear, I think y'all were kind of talking about it a little bit before I got here, but came in on the back end of it, trying to get myself clear. But those professional service contracts going forward will be reviewed by a contract review committee. Is that accurate?
It depends.
Okay. Anybody in here on contract review?
I'll tell you, the law states that if a board or an agency isn't in the treasury, that only legal services contracts have to come through.
Okay.
So moving forward, they'll have to be RFP. They haven't had to be RFP before, but if you have a board that has a checking account, y'all hear I'm talking about checking account boards, checking account agencies, they only have to come through for legal. So it's not going to catch them still.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, members, thank you. That's Representative Shedd.
I just want to thank Ms. Thomas. I think you've done a great job with this, and I want to thank this board today. I feel like we have, and tomorrow we will, really have a review of these. I think we're doing our job when we do this. So I commend the board and commend you.
Thank you. I have a great staff.
Okay, if I could expand upon, on the breakout sessions that we did at Southern Legislative Conference, one of the other benchmarks that they gave was there's like 1,200 occupational boards in the United States that are regulated. There is only 100 of these boards that are regulated by all 50 states. So when we're looking at it, I've asked them to bring for us, when they can find out, I asked them before the meeting, what are the 100 boards that are regulated by all 50 states that we have jurisdiction over? Because I think that we can kind of, when we're looking to cut down on regulation, we can say, okay, all 50 states agree to that, so we don't really have to kind of cull them, because everybody has, 50 states have seen a need. So that's one of the benchmarks that I'd like for us to kind of look at. And then when we bring these boards to answer before us, when we're talking about reducing regulation and bringing people to the workforce, you can, Governor Youngkin's person said they count it as a win if the board comes up and said, as a board, we've evaluated our fees, we've lowered our fees, and we've cut out this regulation and that regulation. So it's not to get rid of all boards, but to encourage all boards to do some self-governance and reduce it on that, and that we can count that as a win, that we have encouraged those boards to examine themselves and come up with, you know, what is something that would be unnecessary or could be done away with in order to help our citizens. So in the review, is there any way that we can start incorporating some of that data in the reviews?
We can try to work and include whatever you guys would like us.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and these types of sunset reviews, y'all get to dictate what we put in there as a committee. So, you know, we've pretty much got them all done for this year, but if
Right.
we'll take and make notes and everything moving forward for next year, we can do different performance characteristics or indicators, whatever y'all think would help you better with that. We don't have any standards on this, so you can tell us how to do it. And I love the suggestion y'all had about the issues as raised by board members and things like that versus our significant issues. We try to make it sound less by not saying a finding, because in our world, a finding is really, really bad. But I understand, too, that people can use that inappropriately. But we can do whatever. And I actually think it might be a good idea, and then I know y'all are going to be like, oh, my God, another meeting. Not a sunset hearing type in the summer, but us as a group get together and have a little work session on what y'all want from us. And we'll do whatever, and we can dig in any way, but we never have time that y'all really can give us feedback, because we're doing this really when we're interacting with y'all.
I think that's a great suggestion. That way it gives us time to maybe get through this cycle of, you know, hearings and all, and then formulate what we see here, what we think's missing, what we need to be changed, and then have a separate, outside of the context of reviewing these committees, to say, hey, here's what we'd like to see going forward as a group.
We'd love that.
Members, y'all, Representative Shedd? No, I'm fine.
I want to say thank you to Holly for getting us here and keeping us on tap of when we're supposed to be and where we're supposed to be. So appreciate that, Holly.
I will note she didn't get me here on time, though. That's not her fault, that's my fault.
I meant to say the rest of it.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of teamwork, Mary Ruth has offered, since Holly is clerking the meeting on Thursday, she sent you an email. She's going to go to Chick-fil-A for all of us because we've got a long day. And so if y'all wanted to respond to that email and then come with cash so that she can have you some lunch here for Thursday. God bless her. All right, well, I think I contributed a little so that we could have some bottled water. I think Representative Simpson contributed a little extra so that there could be some tea and lemonade. But she does need, if y'all want some food, unless y'all want to sit there and watch me eat a great salad from Chick-fil-A. You know, but want to make sure, she wanted me to remind y'all that you might want to have a little bite to eat on Thursday.
And one last thing, I think we're scheduled for 9 o'clock in this room on Thursday. That is, of course, is subject to change. I have no idea what committee meeting, if they'll be utilizing this room or not. So keep your ears open. We may have to pivot a little bit, time and/or location, so.
I know
Right.
there will be a committee meeting in the back room.
Say that again?
There will be a committee meeting in this back room, so we just don't need to come through that way.
Okay, I just didn't know if House version of a bill may be in confirmations and what time that would be. So we'll just keep our ears open, I guess, as to what's happening as we progress through the week, so.
And if I may, Zachary Curvin's a fairly new attorney with our office, with LSA, and unfortunately. Yeah, he's gonna be filling in.
Good.
Big day. I mean, I'm excited. This group was, I turned to Dixie, I said, this is intense in here today, and you did a wonderful job, but.
Very much.
This is Laura Mess. She is an attorney with our.
Absolutely, thank y'all.
None of the intensity was directed at you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. And as always, thank you, Ms. Riddle. Thank you, Margie, for bailing me out.
Always here for you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Not, meeting's adjourned. See y'all Thursday.